Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I am Dana Barrett. I want to officially start with a special thank you to Dr. Key Hallman. I'm so grateful for your support, and I'm proud to stand here with you because you're somebody who has created a community space where conversations happen and ideas are shared. As a former independent bookstore owner myself, I'm proud to launch my campaign for Secretary of State right here at Village Books. This is exactly the right place to talk about the future for Georgia. So let's talk. Too many Georgians are struggling to make ends meet. People can't afford the basics like groceries and rent and childcare. And now with the loss of the ACA subsidies, too many more people cannot afford health care. And here's the bottom line. The only way we fix these problems is to elect leaders who will do more than make empty promises and waste your money on gilded ballrooms. Your vote is your voice, and now they want to take that away too. That's why I was willing to go to jail to protect Fulton County's elections, and it's why I'm running to be the next Secretary of State of Georgia. You know, for most of my life, I was not particularly politically engaged. I watched the news and I voted, but I was busy building my career in technology and starting my business and raising my daughter as a single mom. But all that changed for me when Trump got elected in 2016. For the first time in my life, I was deeply worried about the future of our country. And I was actually mad at myself for not doing more to stop it. Because by that time I was hosting a daily talk radio show about business and technology, and I hadn't used my platform to share my political views. So when I got to the station that morning after the election, I knew I had to stand up and fight. I started talking politics on my show that day and every day after, even though I knew I could lose my job for doing it. And that's exactly what happened. But I was not done fighting. For 6 weeks later, just 6 weeks later, I was back on the air at a bigger, better station, and I was doing 2 hours of political talk a day. Fast forward to 2022, fast forward to 2022 when I was asked to run for Fulton County Commission. There was no Democrat running, so I stepped into the gap and beat a longtime Republican incumbent to win my seat. I've been 10 toes down in the fight to protect our elections ever since. First, Republican cronies tried to install one of their own as the chair of our elections board, and I led the successful charge to stop them. Then last summer, I was threatened with jail time when I said no to the MAGA extremists trying to stack the board with election deniers. We've stopped them for now, but the fight is not over. I said then that I cannot and I will not hand our elections over to extremists and election deniers who think that their voices are more important than yours. And this incident in Fulton County is not isolated. Trump's DOJ is coming after Georgia. They want your private data, and they'll break the law to get it. I have been fighting this fight in Georgia's largest county for years, and I'm ready to take the fight statewide across Georgia as your next Secretary of State. Let me be clear, there is no politician, no billionaire, and no special interest that will keep me from protecting your vote or your privacy or this country. And I have the skills and the background to do it. As Secretary of State, I'll be Georgia's Chief Elections Officer. And I'll also be responsible for the licensing of all businesses, nonprofits, and securities in the state of Georgia. In that capacity, I'll be responsible for enforcing the rules and investigating fraud. For too long, the Secretary of State's office has stuck to doing the bare minimum while asking Georgians to thank them for it. Not to mention, Georgia deserves a Secretary of State who is ready on day one to protect our seniors from scams and cyber attacks. There's so much more this office can do to crack down on fraud and abuse, and I have the experience to get it done. In fact, I'm the only candidate in this race who is uniquely qualified for the job of Secretary of State. I know what small business owners need because I am one. I know how to manage a technology operation because I've done it. And I know how to stand up to bullies and fight for this democracy because I'm doing it every single day. The stakes in this race could not be higher. Georgia's next Secretary of State will be the one who counts the votes for president in 2028. Donald Trump and his anti-democracy billionaire donors know that, and that's why they'll do everything they can to win this race. For far too long, Republicans have been presenting us with a false choice. Give over our elections to Trump and his cronies, or settle for a Secretary of State's office that does the bare minimum. A Secretary of State's office that thinks it's enough just to not break the law. We deserve more. I'm running for Secretary of State because protecting our elections could not be more important in this moment in history. I was willing to go to jail to protect Fulton County elections from MAGA interference. And as Secretary of State, I'll keep fighting for what's right, like I always have. The future of this country depends on your voice, and I'll stop at nothing to defend it. Thank you. With that, I'm happy to take your questions, if anyone has any.
How do you plan to use your background to keep Georgia elections safer? Because you're saying you have like a unique background. Can you speak to that a little further?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I have the technology background. So sort of the procurement of systems, the deciding on what systems we're using, making sure they're maintained and ready and that we have all the processes in place. That's all communicated out to the 159 counties. That's certainly a part of it. But the other big part of it is the cybersecurity piece. And, I just was a part of protecting Fulton County after and rebuilding in Fulton County after a major cybersecurity attack. So I've been on the front lines and I know how to defend against that. I know how to build up systems that are prepared and locked down so that they can't be attacked. So, it's not just enough to say we don't want to have our elections interfered by MAGA, but also by foreign influence. We have to do everything we can to make sure nobody who should be in those files and in that data is in it.
Ma'am, you mentioned the dispute over seating the 2 Republicans on the election board.
Yeah.
Y'all have defied a judge's order and been held in contempt on that. At least it seems fair to ask whether as Secretary of State you would follow a judge's order.
Well, I think the situation there is that we followed the law and we are following the legal process. And I have a right to my vote on that Board of Commissioners, and I believe fully in that right. So, I think the reality is we are seeing rights stripped away from Americans in many arenas, and we have to stand up against that. And, if the lower court isn't following the law, then we take it to the next court, and then we take it to the next court, and we keep on fighting.
What you talked about concerns about cybersecurity. Do you believe that Georgia's current voting machines have been compromised? Do you believe they should be replaced? Would you want to move toward hand-marked paper ballots?
I don't believe they've been compromised, but I think there's a loss of trust. I think look, when I think about technology, I think about my daughter. And when you hear about paper ballots, the kids, the younger people, the people who are getting into these elections now more and more year by year, when you think about filling out those little dots, they think we're crazy. So I think we have to, my background in technology says we can build systems that are secure, but we also have to build trust. So I think if we can find a compromise between providing people enough on a piece of paper when they walk out, a receipt, whatever it may be, that shows their vote, and we can prove that that vote can be validated visually, then great. But I still think we need to have the systems in place that can be secure and can do the work. we need that efficiency.
Fulton County is obviously gets a lot of scrutiny for its elections in the past, and I'm wondering, with you coming from the Fulton County Board, what benefit does that bring you being close to that, and do you anticipate maybe your opponents using Fulton County's election history against you, and how would you maybe address any criticism based on what we've seen, whether it's been proven or other allegations about Fulton County elections? I'm sure it will come up. How would you defend Fulton County elections, or how would you approach that criticism?
Well, I think, since I've been on the commission, we have made significant, first of all, the 2020 elections were clean. We already know this. Anything that's happened in 2020 was within the margin of error, and nothing that was, a minor mistake here or there had any impact on the outcome of that election. So for whatever reason, the Republicans want to keep on litigating that. It's absurd. But since then, we've made even more improvements in Fulton County. We opened a consolidated elections warehouse that is state-of-the-art. We proved that in the last election, in the city elections and in the elections in 2024. So I think, our elections are not above reproach, because nothing is. But at the end of the day, I'm proud of what we do in Fulton County. We have great systems in place, and we have great people running our elections. I don't think I have to defend Fulton County beyond that.
Any final questions?
When you say the Secretary of State has been just doing the bare minimum, what do you mean by that?
I think we have sort of been expected to laud the current Secretary of State for refusing to find 11,000 plus votes. I'm glad that our current Secretary of State, didn't break the law. But we have outdated systems. And at the end of the day, the Secretary of State and the folks that work with him have backed policies to undermine the law. So while they didn't break the law, they were perfectly willing to back things like Senate Bill 202, which took rights away from voters. So that, to me, is the bare minimum. Just because you can sort of get away with it by law does not make it right. And we need a Secretary of State who's gonna actually stand up for the people. We should make it easy for every eligible voter in Georgia to vote, and we should make it abundantly clear that that vote is counted, and that that is the vote, especially in a presidential, that will be delivered to the federal level.
When did you know that this was a decision you wanted to make? Just curious about the genesis of when you decided you wanted to run. Is it something you've been thinking about for a while? Was it recent? How did you come to that decision to actually take this step?
I wasn't actually thinking about it at all. I was fully engaged in running for chair of Fulton County, as I think many people know. But about a week before Thanksgiving, I was asked to run for this seat. Because of the work I had already done in Fulton County. And my first reaction was, who, me? But the more I thought about it, the more I thought it made sense. I talked to a lot of my closest advisors, and I have a lot of backing from folks around Georgia, and I'm really proud of that, and I really believe this is the right time for me to do this.
One more question for me. There's been a lot of criticism of the Secretary of State's office in regards to business licensing. Have you thought about that? Are there any changes you want to make?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a small business owner myself, and I have registered many businesses in Georgia. I think the systems are outdated. I think the process is outdated. I think one of the first things I would do in that role is a full audit of all the systems, a process audit and a systems audit, and make sure we can put a transition in place as soon as possible to move to better, more modern technology. I mean, nobody is even doing work on laptops anymore or desktops. They're doing it on their phone. We need to make these systems available to people on their phones the way people operate in today's modern world.
How do you build trust in our election system? Because there's a lot of distrust right now.
Yeah, that's a really hard question. I mean, I think we have to start from having people in place who are trustworthy. I know I bring that to the table. I know people already feel that way because of the work I've been doing, but it's about the team that we build, and it's also about proving ourselves from day one. I think, as I said earlier, I think doing something more with paper receipts and things like that to make sure that people feel comfortable that their vote went in the way they intended it to and that we have a way to count it is going to be critical. But I also think making voting more accessible, making sure people can vote without standing in hours-long lines, no matter what zip code they live in and what county they live in this state. I think making the whole system work better for people, from registration to the elections themselves, I think is going to go a long way. And by the way, I think the other big thing is transparency. I have always been somebody who has believed in that. We have all the data in the Secretary of State's office. We're the keeper of the records. But we now need to be transparent so people know how things work. And we need, one of the things I've always believed in is using the power of the platform to speak up and speak out. And that's something I don't think the current Secretary of State has really done. So I will be sure that people know what's going on, that if they have questions, they know where to go, and that they get their questions answered quickly.
Last question, anybody?
One question.
Yeah.
From your experience, what part of the election process is most misunderstood by the public, and why does that misunderstanding happen?
That's a good question. I think there's probably multiple things people misunderstand, but I actually think the registration process is probably one of the more confusing parts. When you have to be registered by, for which elections, how you do it, how you check it. This is, again, something that from a technology perspective is sort of halfway there, but not all the way there. I think we can do a better job, A, of having the technology in place and easy to find for people, but B, communicating more clearly and more regularly about what they need to do to make sure that when they show up, they can vote.